Thank you. Good morning and welcome to All Faiths Unitarian Congregation. My name is Gemma and I'll be leading our service today. Here you will find a diverse and inclusive spiritual community where we welcome people with many beliefs. You can bring your whole self, your full identity, your questioning mind, and your expansive heart. At All Faiths, we have more than one way of experiencing the world and understanding the sacred. No matter who you are, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, and no matter whom you love, you are truly welcome here. If you would like to know a little bit more about All Faiths or our membership, please visit our website at www.allfaithssuu.org. Today I have a few announcements. At 11:30, we'll have talk back with Reverend CJ McGregor on Zoom. Monday, we have a life house party on Zoom with Marsha Bates. Tuesday at 7 o'clock, we have Lestitio Divina on Zoom with Reverend CJ McGregor. Wednesday at 6:30, we have a Building Your Own Theology on Zoom. Thursdays at 7 p.m., we have child and youth discussions with Chantel on Zoom. And Sundays at 9 a.m., we have News Talk with Richard Keelan on Zoom. And I have a couple of other announcements. The Climate Action Team would like to invite you to participate in our Global Climate Strike event this Friday, September 24th. These annual events were inspired by the Greta Thunberg, the Swedish child activist who began a Friday strike from school to hold up signs about climate change outside the Swedish parliament. Join us as we gather at 9 a.m. on Friday at the McDonald's on the corner of Colonial and Summerlin. If possible, please wear red as part of a Code Red for Humanity warning and bring a sign about climate change. We will do an hour-long street demonstration with our signs at that busy intersection of Colonial and Summerlin. You will be joining literally millions of other demonstrators around the world who are helping sound the alarm. Get those signs out. Tomorrow evening at 7, Marsha Bates will host a virtual house party where participants will put their input. They'll share how to shape the Lee Interfaith for Empowerment Life's social justice activities in the upcoming year. If you plan to attend, please let Marsha know. And Gina will be sending out an announcement giving the Zoom link and Marsha's contact information. This is an opportunity for you to help to make Lee County a more just place for all of its citizens. Now, if you could please rise in body or spirit as we sing together hymn 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In.
Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Oh, don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
Thank you. That was awesome. So, as Reverend CJ McGregor lights the chalice, please recite the words in your order of service. Joy and grief, health and sickness, light and darkness, peace and anger, life and death, wholesome and brokenness. We each bring all of these here to this sanctuary of unity in diversity for this 1 hour of this one day, and pour them out, commingling the oil of our lives to become the flame, the symbol of our shared living faith. Thank you. Please join in singing hymn number 413, Go Now in Peace, as our children join Chantel Rhodes on Zoom for their Child and Youth program.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
Took me a bit to light the chalice. Each Sunday we share the joys and sorrows that we have felt with the congregation by lighting a candle. If you'd like to light such a candle, please come forward one at a time and share your joy or sorrow. If you'd like your joy or sorrow shared, please make sure to get it to me before our Sunday service, and I'll be glad to share it for you.
This candle is for Edith Ruth, who passed away this past week. Edith was the one that founded the singles group, which is now known as the Solos, and when she couldn't take care of it anymore, she asked me to take over. She was such a fine lady. I will remember her forever. She was the first one that talked to me when I came to All Faith. Many of you don't know that Edith was German. She was German born, and her parents sent her and her sister to England for safekeeping in the early dark years of Germany. I was also good friend with Janine Martin, whose mother was French. And Edith, a Jewish girl, Janine, whose mother fought for the resistance in France, and myself, whose father was part of the German darkness, we became close friends. And this is just to show that we can overcome all this hate and spite and misery that we create in this world. So Edith,
Would anyone like me to bring the microphone to you? I'm light a candle for Nikki Root, who I had a long conversation with yesterday morning, who is really struggling with the loss of her mother. I light a candle for Carol Seifert, who is in Ohio right now with some health issues. I light a candle for all of those who participated in the cleanup yesterday from our congregation. We thank them. And I light a final candle for all the joys and sorrows left unspoken and in our hearts. Let us join in a few moments of silence. But before we do, it is our custom when a member of our congregation dies to light a candle, and that candle remains lit for the duration of our service. This morning, we light a candle for Edith Ruth. May her memory be in our hearts and her name on our lips. And now let us join in a few moments of silence. I had forgotten to light one candle. This is a candle for Vicki and Bill Conran. Bill is actively dying and expected to die today, and I'll be spending time with them later today. May Vicki and Bill find peace. Please join in singing hymn number 123, Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Come into this house bringing all that you are, rest and quiet your weak, worn spirit, for you are here to touch again eternal springs of hope and renewal. Calm your hurried pace. For this hour, let the cares, the fretfulness and worry be set aside. Forgive yourself. You are so very worthy of moving on, of making new efforts, of trying again. And know that you are not alone. There is strength and caring support for you here in this house. You will find comfort if you ask. But look around. You are part of potential community. You can make it what you will. enter into this house of hope. It is good to be together.
Cries in the night, mama's up right away, hurries to find if the baby's okay, rocks her and sings sweet lullabies. Nothing's wrong, she just needs to cry. Little white dress, pink bow in the back, Little Mermaid lunchbox and matching backpack. First grade, first day, scared half to death. Mama dries those little eyes and says to herself, she just needs to cry. She's gonna be just fine. Just takes a little time, but she'll be fine. She just needs to cry. First school dance where no one asked. First romance that didn't last. Mama knew those tears would pass, and her little girl would grow up so fast. Church bells ringing, mama's in the first row. The bride makes her way down that aisle so slow. Those tears in the night seem like yesterday. Nothing's wrong, mama cries anyway. She just needs to cry. She's gonna be just fine. Just takes a little time, but she'll be fine. She just needs to cry. She just needs to cry.
Thank you, Robert. Today's reading is Pennies from Heaven by Reg Stark. Reg Stark was born in Beaumont, Texas, and since retiring from his career as a project developer in the healthcare field, he has pursued his lifelong dream as a full-time artist. Mr. Stark and his wife Linda were high school sweethearts, and they were married for 43 years. They have one son, Jeff, a successful graphic artist and a designer who lives in Mr. Stark's Sugar Land, Texas. I lost count at 300. Oh, wait a minute, this is not right, sorry. Okay, the reading is a little not right, sorry. it's the same. Anyway, he was married for 43 years. They have one son, Jeff. He's a successful graphic artist and a designer in Sugarland, Texas. I lost count at 300. There have been 300 shiny pennies, tarnished ones, mangled ones, and vintage ones. They're called pennies from heaven. Linda, my wife of 43 years, lost her courageous battle with cancer over a year ago. And ever since then, I have been finding a penny almost every day. The first one was in the parking lot of the local post office about a month after Linda's passing. I was there to mail a stack of bills, a new experience for me. Linda had always handled our money, and as a member of the accounting department for an insurance company, she was good at it. I, on the other hand, was not to be trusted with such matters. Whenever Linda found a penny, she would put it in her shoe for luck. If I saw one, I didn't think it was worth the trouble to bend down to pick it up. But that day, I took the penny home and I put it in a jar in the kitchen. It was not until I had to get a bigger jar that I began to realize that something was going on. I found 6 different times of pennies at the Bush International Airport in Houston, the city where I lived. Each penny was in the same place underneath the same chair where I put my shoes back on after going through security. Strange. In fact, I found one in every airport I traveled, though. There is a story for every single found penny. Many times, all I have to do is ask, and one will just appear. I have been stopped in my tracks by something or someone staring me in the different direction, only to find a penny there waiting for me. And it's not just me. Our son Jeff, my sister-in-law Mary, and my best friend Tom have all told me of finding pennies at times when they needed a boost. Linda was known for her generosity, her acute pragmatism, and her tuna salad. She was a caring, doting mother to our wonderful son and a loving, devoted wife to me. She enjoyed a good raunchy joke and had a body laugh for sure, and could demonstrate a sailor's vocabulary whenever her Irish was tested. We all watched as she deteriorated over a long, agonizing 6 months, and out of surgery and out of chemotherapy, without a complaint or a hint of self-pity. She finally succumbed one evening just before midnight in a home she loved, surrounded by her family and friends. I have always had a long-distance relationship with God, doubting more than believing. But now I believe those pennies keep bolstering an unshakable faith, although I backed into it. Somehow someone told me angels leave pennies to remind me you are there with them. I think that the first penny was a pat on the back for getting those bills out of the way and for a job well done. All the rest have proven to me that Linda is just still with me. Yes, you could say that I am now penny wise. Please rise in spirit or body to sing 352, Find a Stillness. You want it back? There was something missing.
Find a stillness, hold the stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find the silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony. Seek the essence, hold the essence, let the essence carry help me flower, watch me flower, carry me in the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony.
I'm speaking on loss and renewal this morning because I know something about loss and I know something about renewal. And renewal, if you haven't guessed it, this is our theme for our services this month. Any other year, that would be a natural choice for September. September always feels for me a time of transition and new beginnings because that's in American life. It's when you go back to school, or you go back to work, or we come home from our summers. But this year, many of us are reeling. We're reeling from an overwhelming barrage of losses, including the loss of our sense of what's normal. We've lost relationships, fellowship, a sense of security, and hope. And how can we possibly find renewal in the face of all of this loss? Franciscan priest and Christian mystic Father Richard Rohr says, loss and renewal is the perennial, eternal, transformative pattern. It's like a secret spiral. Each time you allow the surrender, each time you can trust the dying, you will experience a new quality of life within you. When I was 20, my father died at the age of 48 of a sudden illness. And when I was 21, my mother died at the age of 50. For a few years following, I held so much grief and pain, and unfortunately I turned to some destructive behaviors or habits as a way to find relief from this darkness. It was a very dark time for me, and by dark and darkness, I mean the emotional depths that some people describe as a place with no light. And what Roshani Ray calls a hollow space, too vast for words, through which we pass with each loss, out of whose darkness we are sanctioned into being. Darkness is by no means a pejorative term in my book, and I believe darkness is fertile soil for growth and transformation, renewal. And the Sufi mystic Rumi had a deep appreciation for darkness. He said, in the darkest of your moments, wait with no fear. In the darkest of your moments, wait with no fear. He said, life's waters flow from darkness. Search the darkness. Don't run from it. A book that I read about a year ago that I would suggest that you take a look at, titled A Field Guide to Getting Lost, A Field Guide to Getting Lost by Rebecca Solnit. She says, leave the door open. Leave the door open for the unknown, the door into the dark. That's where the most important things come from, where you yourself came from and where you will go. Grief, loss is a person's spiritual, emotional, intellectual, and physical reaction to loss. Grief is a reaction to loss, which can begin before the loss actually occurs and persists until the grief reaction is no longer needed or no longer noticed. People in the helping professions know that a person's experience of grief is short or it's long, mild or disruptive, mental or physical, depending on both obvious and subtle influences. We have all experienced loss. You have experienced loss, perhaps as little as a favorite piece of clothing that wore out. You moved away from friends. A friend died. A parent died. Perhaps you've experienced panic, depression, despair, sadness, or nostalgia, or anger, or something else. Maybe you experienced foggy thinking. Maybe that's a normal for you, but maybe you've experienced foggy thinking. An absence of emotions, uncontrolled emotion, loss of appetite, or any number of sensations. Grieving includes coping mechanisms to deal with your loss. Not everyone cries, but everyone needs that sphere of love around them. And like many, you may turn inward, reflecting on a bigger picture that you have never considered before. This happens because what is mortal is put right next to what you want to be immortal. What is mortal is put right next to what you want to be immortal in your mind and in your heart. You sense your own mortality as a new reality, especially in these times of COVID when so many are dying around you. But grief is not universal. It's unique and can take many different forms and work differently in each of us. The type of grief we experience varies, as does the way we experience. No two occasions of grief are exactly the same. Likewise, there are no occasions of loss and grief larger than the other. Our pain is never greater than the pain of our neighbor. Our pain is never greater than the pain of our neighbor. Authors Kenneth Mitchell and Herbert Anderson, the authors of All Our Losses, All Our Griefs, another book I would recommend, define grief as the loss of someone or something that we value. And they describe many kinds of loss. They include material loss, relationship loss, intrapsychic loss, functional loss, emotional loss, and role loss, to name a few. And it's interesting, I think, to think of grieving a loss that has nothing to do with death. We have losses that have nothing to do with death. And too many times we misunderstand loss and miss grief others may be experiencing. Think of those among us over the last couple of years who have lost their homes, have lost their pets, have experienced the death of a loved one whose child has moved away for work or college, or those who have divorced. Think of those among us who have experienced a loss or change in their self-image and have lost the possibilities with what might have been, or have abandoned plans for the future. Think of those of us who have experienced impaired vision, hearing, limited mobility, have physically changed as a result of illness or disease, or think of those who have lost their accustomed place in social or professional networks. Think of those of us who have become unemployed, changed jobs, have moved into a nursing home or a care facility, who have joined our community, coming from afar, leaving their friends and family, and those who have gone back to school, sometimes risking their lives. Think of those who are leaving this beloved community. All of these types of loss, and others are occasions for us to grieve. This tension creates an emotional roller coaster which leaves us unsatisfied and leaves us weary. The ride only slows and levels out as you acknowledge the reality of the loss and give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to experience sadness, loneliness, or helplessness. Your intellect may find it hard to believe, but the fact is that when you let go and grieve through the process to the end of the ride, of that roller coaster ride, you can walk on your own in the joy of being on solid ground. You must let yourself go through the process. And many who grieve notice that the story of the loss runs around in their minds in bits and pieces. Perhaps you have experienced this. Some of the bits are accurate memories of what happened, and you can feel badly, even responsible for the loss. And some of the memories are inaccurate and cause you unnecessary distress. One way to discover the difference between the accurate and the inaccurate is the ability to put the story to bed. The ability to put the story to bed. And also the ability to tell the story. Of course, there will be more analysis and perhaps regret and resentments, but we must put the pieces together in a way that helps us overcome that distress. And given time and reflection, we finish the puzzle and you can enjoy a whole picture. You can experience renewal. And that is exactly what happened to me after my parents died. I was patient, gave it time, accepted and lived in the darkness, and day by day moved toward the light of renewal. I accepted and moved through that roller coaster, that process. Grieving well depends on the practices of the community to which we belong. Goals of grieving include to enable a person to live relatively unencumbered by attachments to the person or the thing lost, to remake emotional attachments, renew emotional attachments, to recognize and live with the reality of the loss and feelings occasioned by it. Our role in grieving well depends on our ability and willingness to assist one another, to recognize the pain and sorrow accompanied by a loss, to allow one another to experience that pain in a personal way, and to help heal one another so we may reconnect, renew, re-energize ourselves, and progress forward. When my father died, my mother was obviously devastated. She couldn't spend time in the family home and was staying with friends and family. And I visited her one evening, and she was fixing her hair and putting on lipstick, getting ready to attend a social event with friends. And I remember her weeping because she didn't think she could do it. She didn't think she should be doing it. She should be grieving. And I also remember her friends telling her, "Come on, it'll do you good, get out." They were not willing to recognize her grief and her loss. They were brushing it off because it must have made them uncomfortable. And they were not allowing my mother to recognize her grief and were disabling her ability to grieve and recognize her loss. And this practice seriously harmed her. If we do not help others recognize their griefs and walk with them through that grief, then we risk never arriving to healing, never experiencing that renewal. So how do we engage these tasks as individuals and as a community, as a congregation, to foster healing? How do we get it right? How do we know our practices as a community allow us to grieve well? First, we recognize that denial may be healthy and work for us temporarily, but the long-term use of denial will surely fail us and leave us devastated. I often say it's okay to live in denial, but you can't move in. You can't stay there. We recognize that we can't do this alone, and that is why we've opened up our congregation. That is why we've welcomed people in this sanctuary. We cannot do this alone, manage the loss that we're experiencing. Although grieving by its very nature a lonely task, the resolution of grief requires the presence of another person. The notion that time heals the wounds of grief is only partially true. Time alone is never enough to heal the ravages of loss. Full release from the hold that emotions of any kind have on us depends on their being heard. Grieving is in part an interpersonal process, lonely though it may be. Grieving well demands that we act communally to support one another to successfully grieve. If no one is there to listen, no one will hear our grief. As we forge together, we need to be ready to do a few things, and I offer these as spiritual practices. We need to recognize that before we can reach out to others, we need to come to terms with the losses ourselves. Norman Paul, author of The Use of Empathy in the Resolution of Grief, observes that people generally have a strong aversion to letting themselves in for the grief of others. He writes, before a person can empathize with someone who has those feelings, he or she must have been able to accept their existence in him or herself. We need to be able to recognize our feelings and suspend or suppress the impulse toward premature comfort as a way of warding off the pain. We can also offer respect for the different ways in which people handle loss. We can respect the time it may take for people to grieve a loss. We can also offer another the space to grieve. Our community, our congregation in this sanctuary has become a place where we know we will be comforted and held. And that is why we are welcoming you back. We know you will be comforted and held here. We need to remember that when we have successfully grieved, others may still be struggling and in the need of support. And maintaining a supportive network for a long period of time will be necessary. We need to offer that listening presence that I just spoke about. A grief expressed is not a grief heard unless someone is listening. Our being validated is being heard. And standing by others at a time of loss means, first of all, to listen to them, to attend to them, and to be present to them. And the goal of grieving well is to give ourselves permission to take the time to reach out to one another and pull ourselves back together and make new attachments. Renewal. And so may we begin to allow ourselves to recognize loss, hold out our hands and outstretch our arms to comfort others and to listen to their cries for community and for support. And may we do the hardest work we will ever do. The hardest work we will ever do is meet on the other side of our grief and celebrate this new joy, or the joy of new relationships, freedom from fear and anxiety, and recognize that we are indeed interdependent beings. We need one another. And as Unitarian Universalist Minister Marjorie Bowens Wheatley tells us, in this spirit we build community and move toward restoration, that renewal we're talking about. No matter how deep our loss, something eventually begins to unfurl within our hearts, often when we least expect it. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. expressed it well when he said, we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. And may we be open to the sorrow, the pain of loss, and may we be present for our sorrow and all emotions that arise. And may we learn from and transform loss into renewal. I wonder, what is longing to be renewed in you? What is longing to be renewed in you? There is more love somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. So let us keep on until we find it. May it be so. I do have a joke to share with you this morning. But before I do, I'd like to thank everyone for your generosity that allows us to live our mission and our values in our community and help support the staff and the congregation to do so. If you'd like to make a donation, you can use the information that is below this video. So a newly ordained pastor in the first days of his first call was attempting to console the widow of an eccentric man who had just died. And standing before the open casket, the nervous young pastor said, I realize this must be a very hard blow for you. And Mrs. Stevenson said, he told Mrs. Stephen, just try to remember that what we see before us is only the husk, the shell of your dear husband. The nut has gone to heaven. Ba-dum-bump. Do you get it? Eccentric. The nut has gone to heaven. The morning offering will be given and received.
When you're living with the weight of the world on you, and you're giving everything that you got times two, and you wonder if you'll ever see the light of the day, and you're thinking that it's always gonna be this way. Every now and then a flicker of a shining light comes along and tells you everything will be alright. Where it's coming from is something that you can't explain. It's a moment that can help you take away the pain and lighten up that ball and chain. It's a rush of hope, like when a stranger stops and smiles. A rush of hope, like seeing stars in the sky for 1,000,000 miles. There's hope when something finally goes your way. It's a rush of hope, when you know somehow it's all gonna be okay. It may happen only once in a big blue moon, or it can happen every time that you hear this tune. So addicting, you just want to have some more, satisfying you, a feeling you can't ignore. When it's hitting you to the core, it's a rush of hope, like when you lend a helping hand. A rush of hope, like when you know that it's right and you're taking a stand. There's hope when something finally goes your way. It's a rush of hope, when you know somehow it's all gonna be okay.
As our service closes, I would like to extinguish the flame honoring Edith Ruth. May her memory forever be in our hearts and her name on our lips. As we move deeper into this season, there are some things we know. Fall brings growing darkness that we cannot escape, and thank God the nights become cooler. And if we look closely, we can see different shades of yellow, orange, red, and brown. And life around us slowly retreats in this season, and in other parts of our country goes to sleep. In the rest before renewal, the earth will remain waiting and waiting, and for the time that they are returned to us, the warmth and the light, we await renewal. We can have renewal out of darkness. Blessed be.
All the good we have today can so easily go away without warning. So much to appreciate, so much we can celebrate. With every dawning, we may have dreams that go nowhere, and heavy burdens we must bear. Yet we still have each other's love to share. Yeah. And this treasure we possess gives us joy and happiness. It feels so fine. And this takes care of the rest. Yeah, we've all been taken to the test more than a few times. We may have dreams that go nowhere, heavy burdens we must bear. Yet we still have each other's love to share. Something's always in the way of something. That's just the way life flows. Heaven knows we all have dreams go nowhere. Heavy burdens we must bear. Yeah, we still have each other's love to share. We still have each other's love to share. Love to share. Love to share.
Thank you. We want to thank Reverend CJ McGregor for his message, Robert Bidney for the music, Chantel Rhodes for the Child and Youth Program, Regina Kilmartin on camera, and Ed Elrod on sound. It is so good to be connected and to stay together in whatever way we can. Now, if Reverend, you would extinguish the chalice. Okay, we will join together in "We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of the community, or the fire of commitment that we carry in our hearts and into the world."
This month we are starting something new. We will be having a Life of the Congregation meeting after the service one Sunday each month, and today is that day for the month of September. So what is the purpose of Life of the Congregation? It's a time for the minister to let the congregation know what's happening with our ministries. It's also a time for the congregation, for the president of our board of directors, to let the congregation what's happening at All Faiths. And people that are joining us live have an opportunity to ask questions or offer feedback. So I'll go first, and Chris Stotler will follow me. The state of our ministry at All Faiths, our ministries in terms of social justice, religious education, remain strong. We are experiencing low attendance in our religious education program, because the youth and families are frankly tired of being on Zoom. As you know, the children and youth only meet on Zoom, and they just need a break because some of our children and youth are still on Zoom for school. They're on Zoom to talk with their friends, and we all know how much we're on Zoom and might want to take a break. However, we still continue to offer Sunday programs and programs on Thursday. We are going to be offering a outdoor class, so our children and youth will be able to gather outdoors, masked, socially distanced, and have time together in that way. So we're still figuring that out and how that will work, how that will be safe. So stay tuned for that. Our Heart for the Homeless team, our climate action team are very busy. They are serving people in the community. Yesterday we had the climate action team had a cleanup, and later this week there'll be a gathering, as you heard in the announcements. So those teams, if you're looking to get involved, those teams are pretty active. In terms of our music director, we have yet to find a candidate for our music director position. So in the meantime, we have Robert, and we'll have, thank you, Robert. We'll have other, I'm scheduling other guest musicians as well through December. So that will give us time to find a candidate, someone that we want to bring on board. The other thing is that I've invited Lynn Hart to do our Christmas Eve service. So she'll be joining us. So stay tuned as the search team for a music director continues their work. We've placed another ad recently because everyone comes back in September, so we might get a better response. So the congregation, actually, in terms of pastoral care, there's a lot of, to be honest, there's a lot of suffering out there right now. Some members are dying. Their spouses or partners, of course, need our support. The loneliness and isolation and hopelessness of the pandemic really ravaging some people. And so that's where I'm spending a lot of my time lately. But also I think our ministry is strong. We're able to come back to the sanctuary. In terms of programming, we have 4 new programs this season. We also have the Solos group, which is an opportunity for people to find fellowship. So my point in starting these new programs on Zoom was a response to us not being connected, and as a way to get connected, and I have a responsibility to make sure that people mature spiritually, and through programming and learning, that is a way to do that. So does anyone have any questions about the ministries of the congregation? Chris?
Better take this off. This has been a crazy, busy year with all the challenges and that have been created by the COVID situation that's constantly changing. I'm so glad we're finally opening up the sanctuary again. Okay, is that better? This report summarizes All Faith's current status and highlights some of the upcoming projects and challenges of our congregation. First, All Faith is doing well. Through tight control of our minimal budget, we are where we expected to be at this time of the year. Yes, We are below the budget in revenue, but that gap should be made up during the coming months. During the 5 months of this fiscal year, we have had $89,565 in operating expenses and revenues of $91,633, which are 94 and 93% respectively of this year's budget to date. Thank you for your generous support. One big unexpected expense this year is the need to replace the deck. To meet permitting requirements, we hired a structural engineer to design the replacement deck. We solicited and received bids for the demolition and construction. At a cost of around $30,000, we started looking at alternative solutions. However, we recently got great news. Pat and Bob Newting, two of our founding members, have offered to pay $30,000 of that cost. Hopefully, construction can start this fall. Thank you, Pat and Bob. To meet its fiduciary responsibilities, your board hired consultants to evaluate our insurance needs and complete a reserve study. Our current insurance is adequate, except for the need for a rider on our policy to cover the piano and our sculpture. The reserve study evaluated the anticipated and the anticipated life and large ticket items such as furniture, heating and air conditioning, the roof repair, basically everything you see in and around the church other than the building structure itself. They identified the anticipated replacement cost of those items over the next 25 years. The cost of those items is estimated to be over $184,000. We cannot plan on receiving special gifts to cover all of those costs when they are needed. To cover these future costs, we need to initially set aside $20,000 of our legacy fund, and then, starting next year, contribute $13,800 annually to this reserve fund. The $13,800 will be included in future budgets. That'll give us the money to cover all of our replacement costs through the future. The Burn the Mortgage program has been successful in reducing the mortgage balance. We are on track to pay off the mortgage before the balloon payment hits us in 2024. We have reduced the principal from $151,000 in March of 2019 to $71,500 during this past month. We will be sending a letter challenging the congregation to pay the balance even earlier. That will free up monies for the reserve fund requirements and other budget needs, such as salary increases that have been delayed for the past couple years. If you've been following the monthly newsletter, you're aware of other achievements. For example, we now have cameras and lighting stuff to broadcast our services, and we're not relying upon Regina's cell phone to do the recording and internet connections. Upcoming happenings this month include conducting the annual fiscal procedures compliance review, starting the budget process for next year, planning an auction fundraiser that'll be held in March, and ongoing activities of many of our social justice and outreach committees. Thank you for your support and continued involvement in the life and work of this wonderful congregation. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Chris. And it's always nice to hear we are alive and we're doing well. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this Sunday.